I would reject the thesis that anybody's going to be smarter than anybody else in the venture game because everybody went to the same schools and has had the same experiences. So then it really just comes down to, are you good, I think, at picking people to invest in? And a lot of funds I'm an advisor to, they have the same thesis, I would say, about investing in the sense that we meet people often. We're not really sure about this idea, but we're really sure about that person. So you want to invest in that person just so if it doesn't work out, you're like the first person they call the next time around.
I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step. Just let go. You're in for a treat today. My friend Pankaj Shah is on the show with me. He is a Silicon Valley veteran, but with a heart of gold. So that's not always easy to come by. He is an investor in dozens of companies, an advisor to more than a dozen venture capital firms, and he collaborates regularly with the NBA. So we have that in common. For decades, Pankaj has been able to spot early-stage startups, get involved, inject his value. And what I love about him is that he shares what he's learned. So since this interview, since we've just recorded this, we've had probably almost a dozen calls, the two of us, and he has taught me so much. We have become fast friends as well as business partners in his new venture, which he's allowed me in on. I'll fill you in all about that. It's called Sparrows. He is up to something big, but that's one of the things I love about this show. I get to speak with these incredible minds, share them with you, and then you never know where this is going to lead, right? So let me fill you in on Sparrows. This is basically a match made in heaven for me. It's a new platform, early stage, that is really humanizing the professional experience online. Okay, so imagine looking up someone to learn more about them from a business standpoint, and you actually learn more about who they are, why they do what they do, what makes them tick, what they love outside of business. And you're able to connect on a human level when you hop onto that Zoom call or you meet them in person. And that changes the game, right? That conversation, that journey is going to look much different than if you only knew their career paths, their resume, and maybe where they went to school. So this is a game changer. I think it's amazing for humanity. And don't just take my word for it. Check it out. Links in the show notes below. You can check out my profile on Sparrows. You can check out Pankaj, and just tool around a little bit. This is going to be big. And again, this is still early stage. So know that there's a lot of changes coming. But conceptually, you can imagine how powerful and valuable it can be to have insight on the person and who they are, not just what they've done. This conversation is packed with insight, with knowledge. If you can't tell, I'm all about helping people create wealth and do it with impact. And Pankaj is that, that is really something he's been able to do. And he does it so well that he advises for some of the biggest VCs around. Like any journey, his is winding as well. And so you will hear the tips and turns and roundabouts that have led him to where he has today, right? Nothing fancy or impressive ever starts that way. We know that. And you will hear this amazing ride he's been on. Without further ado, here's Pankaj. Listen up, follow us on Sparrows, sign up. We'd love to get your feedback and get your note-taking platform or pen and paper of choice out because I'm learning a ton from him and I know you can too. Being able to design my own day and do it in the most efficient way is a non-negotiable for me. I'm a bit of a time management nerd, so when I find something that allows me to be more efficient and effective to get the most out of my day, I want to share it with everyone. So here's the scoop. I have a new tool in my productivity tool belt, and it's called Monday.com. My team and I have never felt more organized professionally and personally. And my to-do list is no longer the boss of me. I feel more in control because every project, initiative, date, and task is captured and organized in one place. And my team is in the loop and involved every step of the way. We are in lockstep. Monday.com is like having a brand new operating system. Everything has its own home, deadline. You can see the team members associated with the tasks, and it's color coordinated, so you can easily navigate your own task list. We all have multifaceted jobs, businesses, and lives. With Monday, you're able to keep all of these components organized in their own compartments, but you're also one click away from seeing the big picture and how they all integrate together. Creating systems and procedures within your day and business saves a lot of time. For example, my team and I have a dedicated Monday.com board for this very podcast. Did you know that there are 28 steps involved in getting one podcast ready for air? It's the same exact process every single time. And it's a system that we have put into place. So we know the various key steps are assigned to certain people, and we've mapped out the entire process from start to finish within this one board. This allows us to be streamlined. It cuts back on the amount of emails exchanged as well as the amount of meetings needed. One feature I love is that my social media content calendar is built inside of Monday.com. I finally have one that I actually use, I like, and it's embedded into my overall calendar as well. Another feature we use every single day is the Google Doc integration. You know I love a good spreadsheet. I can pull them into Monday.com and edit them right there versus having 97 tabs open on my computer, which is extremely distracting and inefficient. If how we spend our days is how we spend our lives, then I can't think of anything more important than using the time in our days wisely. Head to hey.monday.com/Amy Jo Martin to start your free trial today. That's hey.monday.com/Amy Jo Martin. Pankaj, welcome to the Why Not Now show. In the spirit of why not now, let's hop right in. Can you tell me about a time when you had a big decision to make and you had to ask yourself, why not now? We will dissect that day, minute, hour, season, whatever you've got, and look under the hood to see how you make your decisions to get from idea to action.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me. I have many of those moments, but the one that comes to mind is when I was starting my first company. So I grew up without any money and didn't go to grade school and wandered out to Silicon Valley in 1999, right before the bubble burst. My brother-in-law is actually the one who brought me out here. And I saw everything go really, really up. And it was exciting because everybody was chasing these romantic ideas. And then it all crashed and it was like a nuclear winter here. And I, for whatever reason, decided I was going to quit my job, sell my house, and went, I think, about 103 weeks without a paycheck. And also had my second kid, my beautiful daughter, who's about to turn 18, starting my first company. And it was a public Wi-Fi network of all things. And I remember for most of those 103 weeks, sitting there thinking like, what am I doing? I have these two little kids and didn't really have enough saved. And I didn't really know what I was getting into because I didn't understand venture capital. I didn't understand startups. I didn't really have any good mentors back then to help me through the process. But that was probably my first meaningful why not now moment, because I sat there thinking I really came from nothing. So there's like really not anything to lose, and I woke up and I was like, why not? Like maybe this is the best moment in time to go try something, because it's not like I have any opportunity cost, Yeah, so that was a good one.
Oh my goodness. And this was after 103 weeks without a paycheck and a new daughter.
The daughter came in the middle. So she's January of 2003, and I had started this in 2002. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it was a very uncertain time in Silicon Valley because, the dot-com bubble we had, there were a bunch of companies that didn't really need to exist, and they all went public, and a bunch of bad behavior, and everything just imploded. So it was so centralized to this economy here. And I remember walking into offices once we actually did raise a little bit of money. And it was like in the middle of an episode of The Walking Dead. Like you would walk into this office space in Cupertino and everybody's pictures and half-filled coffee mugs and everything is still there. And those office spaces had been empty for like a year. Like the landlords didn't even have the money to go clean them out. So yeah, it was a pretty interesting time.
Crazy. And then, of course, the dot-com bubble, but then 9/11 right after that, right? And so many, I was just out of college, and I worked at an ad agency, and one of my first clients was an airline that went under right after 9/11. Like people just weren't, national airlines, they weren't flying as much. And it was such an interesting time. And I think about then 2008, and then again now, and we have these times of, inflection points where you can innovate or not. And you're kind of, I remember being up at GM in like 2009, and I had to deal with Chevy, and they couldn't afford sticky notes or office supplies for the few people that were left. Right. Like you had to bring your own pens and paper.
Yeah.
It was crazy. It was a ghost town. So what would you say, seeing these cycles that you've seen, not only as, on both sides of the fence of investing in entrepreneurship and business, what are some of your biggest takeaways? We're in the middle of, a wild ride here.
Yeah, that might be an understatement. I don't know what we're in the middle of now.
Nobody knows.
Yeah. I would say the biggest thing for me is just persistence. I mean, I reflect back even in starting my first company, I think the thing that got me through it ultimately was like just not giving up and showing up every single day. Because, aside from not having anything really to lose by starting that company, the flip side is, it's frustrating when you're doing it all alone and nobody's listening to you. And it takes so long to get things funded back then. It's obviously different now. But I think basically just waking up every day thinking, I really don't want to quit. Part of it was out of fear, anxiety, ego, like all those things. But yeah, I think one of the things I've carried through 2008, even now, is just like, you just have to show up. Like it's more than half the battle.
Oh, so true. So true, right? It's such a simple, yet it's one of the hardest steps. So looking at your journey, and you've seen a lot, you've been involved in you're involved right now in, what did you say, like 100 different companies. You advise for a lot of VCs, and investing is it's a global concept because we can look at it through so many different angles, whether we're investing in ourselves, in other companies, in real estate, in the market, or whatever. At the very simplest terms, like, what does investing mean to you? Like when you just think about like the systemic core concept, what is it?
People.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So double click on that. I want to like double down, talk to me more about that. As someone who has invested for a long time, and you also, you have that entrepreneurial spirit as well. What do you look for?
Full disclosure on my investing portfolio, I'm not sure I found a single deal on my own. Really? I literally think every single company I've invested in came through a friend or a mentor of mine. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I'm not sure I've sourced a single deal on my own. And one of the things I realized early on investing, it is a very hard business. And it takes a long time to get money out of it. So you have to be super patient, which obviously like in public markets, you can do whatever you want, right? And in the venture game, it just takes so long for these companies to mature. And most of the things, as I said earlier, like most of these ideas are just romantic ideas. Like founders start them and they're enthralled. We're all megalomaniacs, right? And so we convince ourselves that whatever we're working on is the most important thing ever. And I think if you find founders who are persistent and thoughtful and open, that's pretty much all you can ask for. I mean, it's like most of the companies just go under. And unless you're Sequoia or one of like the most of the Excel, one of the top funds, I think most of these things are like lots and lots of misses and a couple of hits that carry everything. So if you don't have, I would reject the thesis that anybody's going to be smarter than anybody else in the venture game because everybody went to the same schools and has had the same experiences. So then it really just comes down to, are you good, I think, at picking people to invest in? And a lot of funds I'm an advisor to, they have the same thesis, I would say, about investing in the sense that we meet people often. We're not really sure about this idea, but we're really sure about that person. Wow. So you want to invest in that person just so if it doesn't work out, you're like the first person they call the next time around. It's like a quirky little part of the VC business if you're not in it. Yeah.
It's like a talent agency. It reminds me of like a WME or a CAA. You're spying talent. And I remember, so I think it was Tony Hsieh, speaking of, it's been a heavy week, but I remember him telling me at one point, I'm pretty sure it was him, talking about this concept of, imagine having a wave of innovation or some sort of, and then a surfboard, which is the product, and then a surfer who is the founder and or founders. And he talked about focusing on the surfer. And hopefully they have the wave and the product. But it really reminds me of what you just said. It's like this triple threat, but sometimes you can take the surfer and just go find another surfboard and wave, right?
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many good ideas. Like you need so much luck. It has to be the right time, the right place, the right money. I mean, everybody's had good ideas for a long, long time. And you look back and how many companies actually ended up making it in an economic sense, long-term sustainable generational companies. It's just a small percentage because you just need all those things. And that's what I'm saying. It's like, if you optimize for intelligence, you're going to be like, where do I even go? Because like everybody around here is super smart and went to amazing schools. And it's the same thing with ideas. So you can have a sector thesis, like I'm into machine learning or blockchain or whatever it is. But again, they're going to be like hundreds and hundreds of founders in every single category that the venture community is interested in. So to me, like the most obvious thing is just like figure out the people you want to work with.
How do you invest in yourself?
That's a deep question. I don't know if we can get through that in 46 more minutes. That's been part of the journey. So if I'm going to be completely upfront with you, I never really paid attention to my own mental health up until about 6 or 7 years ago. And I went through a personal issue, which I'm not going to bore you with, but it kind of reset my life. And I grew up in an environment where it wasn't okay to really talk about mental health. So I dealt with anxiety and depression and ego and all kinds of like negative emotions for a long, long time that I didn't really understand how to process. And it manifests itself in the workforce in different ways, right? Like if you look back at the first few companies I started, I'm not sure anybody had fun working at those companies because I was more of a boss than a leader, which I think is like a really interesting differentiation, at least in my tiny little head, because when you're a boss, it's usually coming from a standpoint of like anxiety, fear, uncertainty, where you have to just like kind of through brute force convince people you're right or act a certain way. And I think as I've grown, I'm much more interested in being like an authentic leader. I don't know if I'm any better at it now than I was back then, but your question about just like, how do I take care of myself or invest in myself? It's more just trying to be thoughtful and present and vulnerable and learning from the mistakes that I've made and surrounding myself with people who are good coaches and mentors. It's just all stuff I never really paid attention to up until I had to, which I think is how the universe works. Everything goes okay until it doesn't. And so right. I had my moment for sure.
Right. And you touched on something that I think is part of the everyday solution is being intentional, but also in my experience, it's always an inside job. Like whatever the problem is, it's usually an inside job, and then the external solutions will definitely come.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've ever run across Jennifer Ocker at Stanford. She's a genius professor and a dear friend. I would label her, without any hyperbole, as an actual gift to humanity. But one of the things that she teaches and talks about and writes about is finding purpose and the difference between purpose and happiness, because happiness ends up being like a dopamine hit. You know, if you're chasing happiness, you're just like, you need some kind of validation that's making you happy, as opposed to finding purpose, which is much more long-term and sustainable, where it's like, hey, am I waking up every day working on the things I want to work on? Am I being the type of person I want to be? It's harder for sure, but I think more meaningful in the end.
100%. I'll definitely look her up. Thank you for that. Great tip. And I think about the science of happiness and learning about the different types, right? The rock star high, that kind of fleeting, it's like a rock star. You're on stage and then it's over. And the flow happiness, and then the higher purpose. And I wish they would have taught me that in college, you know? Damn it. Yeah. Where were you?
I know.
So when you think about just productivity and time management, what are a few of your go-tos? What are your tips?
So one thing I just started doing, because I've had a lot of people I'm close to suggest it, so I decided to give it a whirl, is to not use my phone right when I wake up. And I don't know the science behind this yet, because I'm just getting like more interested in this topic. But I think like the way your brain wakes up and activates is a lot different when you pick up a piece of electronics first thing in the morning versus not. So I'm trying to be like a little more still in the morning before I start my day. One of the life hacks I've just started again last week is I'm trying to take the last 5 minutes of every hour and do something that puts a smile on my face. So I either look at pictures of my kids when they're really young. I have a ton of them on my phone from 21 years ago. I have 2 dogs. They're sleeping right under my feet right now. So I either take them for a walk or look at pictures of them, listen to music. So it's just like breaking up my hours. Because, you know, we, especially in this environment, we're now in the middle of the pandemic. It's like, I think most people are sitting in chairs, just Zooming all day long.
Yeah.
It's like I need to engage my mind in different ways. So I'm trying to break up my hours, not my days, literally my hours, to give myself like a little bit of a break.
How do you remind yourself? Do you set a prompt or time box it, or like have something in your calendar? How do you remember and train yourself? Because that's a habit in itself, to just our hours bleed into the next. How do you stop and do that? What's your...
I literally put a 5-minute hold on my calendar every single hour. And I'm just trying it out. Like, it's been a good first couple of weeks doing it. So who knows if it's sustainable, if it's going to work. But I am trying to think through how to be more productive, maintain energy outside of just general diet things, right? Which that's like a whole separate podcast. But I'm trying to optimize diet side and just emotional well-being side.
And we were introduced through our mutual friend, Jen, who we're both very grateful for. I would love for you to share a little bit more about your recent, big endeavor and the way you're looking at social networking and humanizing. And, we're very much in alignment on that front. And it's a heartstring for me. But yeah, can you talk a little bit about that?
I started this company called Sparrows about a year ago, and we were just tinkering with it for a while. We actually didn't raise money for it until the middle of the year, until June. But the idea here is to humanize your professional life. The behavior we have now as a society when you get introduced to somebody in the business world, and that could be for this podcast, for a business meeting, for a job interview, is you get introduced and you're like, okay, Amy Jo Martin, LinkedIn, because I want to figure out where you went to school and what you've done. And then I try to figure out like, okay, do we have anything in common? Can I talk to you about anything? Mm-hmm. The thing it's missing is the soul. Mm-hmm. We're 2 decades in to a society where, at least the world I live in, people are much more interested in who you are as opposed to what you've done. And that starts getting into like, are you going to be a good culture fit if you're working at my company or as an investor in my fund or whatever it is? And so there are a handful of us, too many to name, but a handful of the younger VCs in Silicon Valley really helped push this idea forward. Frederick Gross at Storm Ventures, Elaine Zelby at Signal Fire, there are a few of them that were super active and still are. And we set out to go create the perfect profile. So if you go to Sparrows and create one, you can talk about whatever you want to share with the world. And it's a compliment, I would say, to LinkedIn as opposed to a replacement. But the entire mission here is to showcase who you are as opposed to what you've done.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. All right, everyone, I've got an announcement. As of today, we are officially enrolling for the 2021 Renegade Accelerator Program, formerly called the Renegade Brand Bootcamp. Okay, so who is this program for? What is it? The Renegade Accelerator is for driven female leaders, executives, and entrepreneurs ready to massively increase their impact and income. The program is for like-minded, like-hearted women all over the globe. The experience is intimate, live, real-time, virtual, and it's led by me. Our curriculum is equal parts education, practical education, collaboration, and accountability. In the accelerator, you'll learn directly from me, and I share everything I've learned over the past 20 years in business. We meet in real time to learn, discuss, and grow together. This is high touch. I'll teach you a variety of things, from personal branding to the business side of public speaking, podcasting, publishing, marketing partnerships, how to productize your intellectual property, and we even talk about investing. I teach you all about the different types of investing in order to build your personal wealth. You will also learn the renegade mentality, which is a key ingredient in your success to generate real results. This program is the career love of my life because I get to curate a mosaic of driven, like-minded, like-hearted women who come together to lift each other and themselves up to the next level. After the Renegade Accelerator, you become a member of my top-level alumni community. This group of unmatched women who are making a positive impact is personally curated by me. The relationship building and networking opportunities are endless, and this collective of real, valuable connections will be something that you have forever. If you're at the point where you are ready to take action and accelerate, head to renegadeaccelerator.com. You can sign up for more information where I will guide you in determining if the program and the timing is right for you. If not you, then who? And if not now, then when? Why not now? Head to renegadeaccelerator.com.
I literally have been saying for 12 years, share the who and the why, not the what. The what will come through, I promise, but
That's right.
It's like that's where the connections are made and connections convert out of pure intention, right? So I love that so much. What was the genesis for this? Was there a why not now moment where you were like, you mentioned a few minutes ago about having kind of a season of inflection of 6-7 years ago. What caused this desire to put this out into the world?
Yeah, so this one I would say was more by accident because, we started off with a much different mission for Sparrows. It was actually going to become kind of a community for like the non-general partner venture community. So let's say there are 5,000 people in venture that aren't general partners, like check writing people at the fund. And the reason this started really was because we were sitting there trying to figure out how to match people. And like a few of the folks are like, we don't want to use LinkedIn because we all went to the same schools and have the same jobs. Like if I'm going to get into a new community, I want to understand who the people are, which is what led to creating this kind of new profile to begin with. And I just sat there staring at it for a while. And another mentor of mine saw like a very early version of it in November and asked me, he's like, well, who's this for? And I said, oh, it's this young venture community. And then he looked at it, he's like, well, who's it not for?
Smart.
I was like, that's the right question. And then I started thinking, maybe it actually is for everybody. Like I know in my world, I'd much rather people know who I am as a human being as opposed to what I've done. then I started thinking, okay, like if you look at any LinkedIn profile from somebody who's in college or just recently out, they all look the same. And, it's just like this factory. And it's just like all these profiles basically look the same, and people are coached into how to present themselves, and it lacks authenticity. So I find like extreme amounts of value in LinkedIn is just like a tool to like help me build this company and be in the workforce. But it is missing like the thing I'm most interested in presenting to the public. So my, I guess, why not now moment with Sparrows was really like in, I'd say February. I was thinking, okay, people were starting to talk about COVID. People were traveling like a little bit less. March happened. The world fell apart. And I was like, there are two things that basically made me jump in full time with this thing. One of them was it's hard enough if you're an introvert or not a massive extrovert to get to know people in general. Forget about having to do it through a computer screen. So I thought from just a timing perspective, this might be a good moment in time to launch Sparrows, because, if one of the things we can do, if you had a profile, you could click on mine and you'd instantly see what we have in common. So it would give us stuff to talk about where it would be hard to like understand that without a Sparrows profile, right? So that was one reason. It's just like, I think COVID made this more important. It's just like a platform for people to use to like build relationships when they can't meet in person. The second was just like the political angst really around the entire world, where, when I grew up, I'm 47, so I grew up in, I would say, the 80s and 90s. If you had differences, there was like civil discourse. You could be like different religions, races, cultures, political affiliations, on and on and on, and still be friends with people. And now we wake up and it's like everybody has their pitchforks out ready to stab each other. I'm like, what happened? And so I thought, like, if our site can do even like some small work to show people we actually have things in common with each other and we can build off of that, as opposed to just trying to figure out the differences right away, that it was also meaningful. So those are really the two things that led me to spend all of my time on Sparrows.
I love it so much. And it's so humanizing. And I think we used to compartmentalize so much because we could, and it was convenient. But now everything's integrated, and some bridges exist and some don't. So this is a huge bridge for us to be able to blend our personal and professional worlds, and create those connections. So it's so cool. And what's the concept behind the name Sparrows?
Yeah, so I run a collective out of this property here called Finches, because the story behind that is really like when I was in the middle of remodeling this house, there were these two finches that sat by my side every single day in my patio right out here.
Oh, cool.
So when I was naming this collective, it's a group of thought leaders from all around the world that convened here for dinners pre-pandemic, obviously. We named it Finches. And then Sparrows was incubated within Finches. So I wanted to keep the bird name. And sparrows are very social birds, and they sing and they kind of move between flocks. So they're not like a nuclear kind of bird. They can bounce in and out of things and jovial fun. I just thought it was just like a cool, cute name. We had, I would say 80% of the people are like, that's a cool name. And 20% are like, whatever, I don't get it. So yeah, but that's the genesis.
Yeah, it's a name. It's more about the feeling, right? It's more about the why and the who. And not many people had
I think that's right.
Emotional, visceral connection to, Yahoo or Google either. So does it really matter?
Right. It might not matter.
No. How funny. So what's one lesson you find yourself learning over and over?
In life in general or for work?
Whichever you choose, your own adventure. Whichever.
I would say there's a lyric to a song, and I'm not remembering which song it is, but it's "The truth is not the same without the lies you've made up," which, I mean, we could end up talking about that lyric for a long, long time, but I think we do have a habit as human beings of convincing ourselves of reality. Yeah. And I've been for the last 7 years trying to not do that, like just be much more open to ideas and perspectives and truths, because they vary amongst people. That's probably one, because I keep thinking about it. I don't really know if I'm any better now than I was back then, but it's like always in my head where I'm just like, everybody has their reality based on things they've experienced either with me or even separately. And it's hard to like not form these judgments, because you could have like a bad interaction with somebody And for all you know, like somebody in their family got sick that morning or something went wrong or whatever. And it's just like bringing myself to not judge people so quickly based on my reality is probably like the lesson I need to learn the most. And I've struggled with. Yeah.
It's so good. It's so good. And I think it goes back to the whole, I think about bridges a lot and being able to create more. I think we need more. And you really can't create them without that awareness or just self-awareness, which leads to self-actualization. And it's a biggie. If everybody could do a little more of that themselves, I think naturally we'd start to see some interesting shifts. When you think about the concept of just making things happen versus letting them happen, right? So you've done some big things. You have a very decorated career path. Clearly, you're very capable. But at the same time, how do you know and discern between when to push on the gas versus when to ease up?
So that's something I handle a lot differently these days than I used to, because my first few companies, I was just like, go, 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 go. And I didn't spend any time building culture or fostering like positive thoughts and environments with my employees or investors or anything. I was basically just like a train wreck for the first few companies.
Same.
A couple of them worked out great, but there was a lot of learning to be had. This time around, I am trying to be more present and thoughtful and welcoming and engaging. And when I think about stepping on the gas, even with Sparrows, I can give you a very tangible example. We've not spent any time marketing Sparrows because I felt like the time just wasn't right yet. In companies past, like if this was 10 years ago, we launched the site in June, and by like the middle of July, we would have had like 5 different marketing campaigns going. And I would have forced it, and it would have been unpleasant because a lot of things would have broken and people would have gotten burned out and on and on and on. And this time I'm just trying to take the long view where it's like we're building something so meaningful and so purposeful, not to be too zen about it because, it is a business and we're here to make money in the end, although I don't know how yet. But it's like, these things happen at their own pace and their own time. So I think my mode of operation with this company in general is to just like let things come to us as they may. As opposed to trying to force things that don't really need to be forced.
So my question for you, and inquiring minds would probably want to know, for entrepreneurs who are first time out of the gate and economic model feels like everything to them, right? It's like, okay, I've got to make money and might be 20 years on the other side of you, right? Like the rookie kind of Bambi legs type of entrepreneur, which we've both been there. What would you say to them if they were in a similar spot? So let's say, there's someone listening who they believe in it. They know this idea and this solution is valuable, but they don't exactly know yet how to monetize it. They don't know the economic model quite yet. What would you say to them?
I would say go raise money and figure it out. The beauty of the ecosystem these days, and our lead investor, by the way, is Charles Hudson at Precursor Ventures, who's also an amazing human being, known him for 16 years. And his job at his fund is to go find companies when they're paper napkin ideas, right? And there are a bunch of funds. Like when I started off in Silicon Valley, there were basically 100 funds that were all Series A funds. There was no such thing as pre-seed or seed extensions or any of these things. And we raised $5 million to go start companies back then because that's what it costs. These days, you can go get something started for $200,000-$300,000 to just try things out, depending on the sector you're in. And there are 1,300, I think, micro VCs, so like sub $100 million-ish funds, and most of them want to catch things super early. So I do think, like, if you're a first-time entrepreneur, part of the GP's diligence is making sure you've actually at least thought through things, like have an operating assumption about like how you will make money or grow the company or who you need to hire. All those things are important to think through, which is why I think going through diligence with VCs is actually a good thing. Like it is intellectually stimulating and thought-provoking. And but I would say, like, I think most investors realize every projection that founders make never really comes true. When it comes to delivering product or hitting revenue milestones or anything. It's just like all this made up stuff on slides. You look at it in the past and you're just like, what were you thinking?
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
99% of the time, it's not going to look the way we thought, right? So that it brings us back to the beginning where you talked about people and believing in the human behind the idea, which is it's encouraging, I think, for people to hear that, because there's always going to be a level of questioning, and being an entrepreneur is like the Chicago weather. Like, if you don't like how your day is going, just wait 15 minutes because it's going to change. And it's a roller coaster, right? Yeah, totally. So when you kind of look at the grand scheme of things and you think back to when you first were getting started and the vision you may or may not have had and where it is now, so many people listening are in a transition career-wise. And there's so much fear around that, right? Stability and just the unknown. But yet again, we're surrounded by that this year. What would you say about just kind of that renegade mentality that you had after 103 weeks of, without a paycheck? What advice do you give to people who they're wanting to take that step and they're just scared?
They should be scared. I mean, it's scary. I mean, like, founders, especially when you're first getting started, I mean, like, you're all alone. So yeah, I would say if anybody tells you that you're not going to be scared, it's like, that's a different makeup of a human being than I know. But I would also say, like, and it's not just Silicon Valley. I mean, you can go to any tech hub, right? You can be in LA, New York, Chicago. It doesn't really matter where. But I do think, like, joining groups where founders can communicate with each other, or finding mentors so you're not really all alone every single day, like, all those things are really important, because you want to have a small army of people pushing you forward. It's my sixth company. Like, I still have those people pushing me forward every single day, because some days I wake up and I'm just like, what have we done? Like, that feeling never really goes away, at least for me. So yeah, I think if somebody is, like, nervous about how hard it is to get a company started, that's like a thoughtful nervousness. So the way to solve around that is just to surround yourself with people who've been through it so many times before. Yeah, I think that's probably the easiest way.
And so it sounds like do you feel like you still get imposter syndrome?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what do you do?
Every day.
Do you call your mentors? What is your go-to?
One of the interesting things is I think most of my mentors, they have it.
Yes, I know. I agree.
Yeah. I still wake up almost every single day just thinking, like, what happened? Like, how am I living here and doing these things? It's just like, it's not like it doesn't feel right. It just feels like, I don't know, I just can't put the pieces together of, like, the butterfly effect. Like, how did this actually end up happening? It's just so bizarre. And I think that the default, at least in my mind, is just like, I don't belong. I mean, I was even looking through the people that you've interviewed in the past. I'm like, what am I going to say? Like, I have literally nothing to add. You've done so many amazing interviews with, like, these incredible people. So, like, even last night when I was, like, trying to get ready for this, I was looking at it just being like, oh my God.
And it's so funny because that blows my mind. You know what I mean? Like, it sounds so, what you said about your mentors getting it too, I've asked some of mine and they've said the same. And it's such a universal yet lonely feeling. But when you know it's universal, it feels more okay, I think. So it's just even being willing to talk about it, it's fascinating. It's the human species in that way.
Yeah.
I think about, if someone who's investing, and I have dabbled for the last 10 years, but I've gotten more serious over the last year or two. That being said, the companies I've invested in are my mentors' companies. So what you said to me about kind of that, you haven't really sourced a single deal on your own, and you feel like it's the people you know, and I feel really grateful and a little like it didn't work for this because I'm lucky to have been kind of invited. As people think about, looking for investment themselves, and as a female who has and also gotten funding, and you're in Silicon Valley, you're in this world that this is not a new conversation, women and funding. Like, it's just not a new conversation, and it's also not going away. What do you see as your role, as a male who has a lot of experience, a lot of influence, to help kind of bridge. And I feel like men are usually the solution to the kind of race and acceleration toward gender equality, whether we're talking about investing or we're talking about other things. What's your take on this subject matter in general? I'm just curious, given your role.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, to state the obvious, like, we haven't really done a good job as a community in Silicon Valley addressing the situation. And even since the Me Too movement started a few years ago, we had some folks taken out. I'm not sure it's gotten like meaningfully better. I would hope it has. I've seen a lot more women get jobs in venture, which is awesome to see. And I have seen slightly more women get funded, but I've also still been hearing like horror stories of just not being treated appropriately and things like that. But I would say my role, if you ask, the first thing that I think about is just making sure whoever is in my network is in everybody's network. So I think at least when I started my career, I would hoard my network and be like, oh, these are my people. Because it gives you some currency, right? Like if you start becoming friends with certain people and you're the gateway, it's like people need you. And I think over the last few years, I've just let all that stuff go. It was kind of like anybody in my world who can be helpful to any founder, woman, man, any gender, it doesn't really matter to me. I want to be helpful and make sure that people in my network are accessible. It leads to another point, by the way, because you're asking about these first-time founders, like how do you even go through this stuff? And I think I usually see, because when I meet a founder and they're looking to raise money, if it's an idea I think I can be somewhat helpful with, I'll just say like, oh, can you share who you're thinking about raising money from? And inevitably, I get these spreadsheets that have like 600 names on them because they've basically researched like every single venture person that they can get their hands on and be like, okay, this is like the list, and they'll put the name, the fund, the sector, on and on and on. And I would say like, just be a little more thoughtful and purposeful about that too, which is just like, well, who do you want to work with? Because your investors are going to be part of the family and part of the journey, right? So I think having some insight of like how people function, how they interact with their founders, what sectors they care about, stages, are they good citizens? Do they participate when things are going bad? Like all those things are important.
That's so valuable. That's really, I think, unique and original. Ask that question here and there, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness and some tactics to your answer, because I think that's where sometimes we're falling short. It's not out of intention; it's out of the literal how. How do we do this? It's not, So the fact that you said, whoever's in my network is in everyone's network, like it's as well as being able to ask yourself those 3 or 4 questions you listed off. It's so good. Who in your mind is like a professional why notter? People you've come across in your journey, and personal, professional, just true renegades. Who comes to mind?
Ooh, I have a long list. I would say Jennifer Ocker is one of them for sure.
Cool.
Who we spoke about earlier. I think Matt Bellamy, the lead singer of a rock band called Muse, I would put him up there. He's just so innovative and curious, and such an intellectual and an amazing human being. Yeah, I would throw him into the mix. I don't know. I have so many people that I could talk about that are just like amazingly inspiring. David Siminoff, the guy I started my second company with, Silicon Valley legend, him and his wife. If this makes it onto the air, he might shoot me for it, but his wife is like, 100 times smarter than he is. And she was early Yahoo and also Silicon Valley legend, but both of them, I think they're just like so thoughtful and purposeful about like just how they conduct themselves. Like I love them to pieces. And I think they are renegades. Like they blaze their own trail and did just the most amazing things where you look back, you're like, how does that even happen? How? Mark Cuban. How about him, right? I mean, it's like, I think you've interviewed him a couple of times. So yeah. And I've run across him a few times, the NBA Summer League and things like that. And I mean, even his story and his journey about how he's leveraged himself and his network and his thoughts and his ideas when everybody was looking at him like he's just this lunatic. And then you wake up and you're just like, it's like, what did he know? Yeah. So that's a handful of people that come to mind.
Oh, I love those. I love that you started with a musician too. Like it just, Jennifer was actually first, so more academic, but it's fun to see that that intellectual, just like renegade vibe in different categories and different verticals, and just see how different people are doing it. Yeah. And what you said about being like, one moment they're a lunatic and the next moment they're brilliant, right? It's that every overnight success is 10 years in the making at least.
Yeah.
So true.
I mean, even you keep going on music, like take U2. I mean, those guys, they've been a band for 40 something years, right? And they've somehow managed to like out-Beatle the Beatles. Bono has become bigger than Elvis. I mean, it's just like, you look at these guys and they just never stop working.
Yeah.
True. Right? It's just like whatever's in front of them, it's just not good enough. And yeah, it's like their ability to innovate and create sounds and meaningful music that have inspired generations now. It's just like, it's also unbelievable to see. It's just like, I don't know, when you get to that level of just being so excellent, like you've done things better than anybody in your industry has literally ever done it. Like, how do you keep going? Because there's nothing to aspire to. They're like already the biggest band in the history of the world and probably the best. I mean, it's just like, they just keep churning out hit after hit after hit and amazing albums, right? So I think that fire from within, it's like one of the things I try to surround myself with as many people as possible that have that, because it's motivating for me.
So true. And transcending your own, industry into others and being able to influence and leverage that. It's crazy. Where do you get your news? How do you get your news?
I try to not read it that often. And I try to get objective news. So I look at BBC actually first. Yes. And then I'll go to CNN and Fox, who are like obviously as far apart from each other as you can get. But I think if I'm going to like learn or try to be like current with a topic that's not like sports or music or whatever, like some current event or world event, I at least want to be educated from all sides. So if I'm in a conversation, I can at least appreciate where people are coming from, even if I don't agree. So those are the three places that I tend to go to. Yeah, I used to spend a lot more time on the New York Times, and I've started to read them like a little bit less. So yeah, I think it's been more like BBC first and then CNN and Fox separately second.
That's a great call. We talk a lot about that in this household. BBC is pretty reliable, fairly objective, just outside the boundaries.
It's actually journalism as opposed to just commentary, which I think is like a lost art.
It's a brave new world for sure. So a few rapid fire questions for you. What keeps you up at night?
My anxiety.
What's your first go-to when you're feeling anxious? How do you deal with that?
I learned one trick, which is to like breathe in twice pretty quickly and then breathe out. And like, if you do that like 4 or 5 times, it kind of resets your body, and it works for me. I think anxiety is one of those things where like everybody has like a different solution at different levels. So it's for sure not medical advice. It just works for me. And the other is I try to just focus on things that make me smile. And we talked about it earlier. So like, I just think about the beautiful moments I've had with my children, or playing with my puppies, or foods that I've eaten, or shows that I've been to, concerts that I've been at, like those types of things. So I do a much better job of controlling it now than I used to, or managing it, I would say. But yeah, that's probably the only thing that ever keeps me up.
That's cool. The physiological, just the breathing side, so huge. I learned to meditate maybe about 5 years ago, and it's just life-changing, right? It's just absolutely life-changing. So you seem like a music fan. I would say, based on a couple of the U2 Muse, favorite band? Who do you?
U2.
U2, is it? Yeah.
And Muse. It's a tie.
Okay. I got to see U2 in Cowboys Stadium, which is not the best acoustics, but it was pretty wild to see that many people. And then go backstage and meet a couple of the guys. And it was like that, one of those moments where you're just, like you said, legends. And one of the things that they said was every night they get out there and just they're smiling because they get to do it versus have to do it, right? It's like that's kind of what keeps the experience for us in life anyway. Okay, pirates or ninjas? Who's tougher and why?
Oof. I would assume ninjas. I've never been asked that question or even heard of it. I'm saying ninjas because I think it's more of a craft. When I think about a ninja, it's something that you train for and have to be like very mindful of. Like, I'm going to become a ninja. As opposed to being a pirate, it could have just been like, whatever, I'm going to take this ship out and see what happens. So yeah, I would say ninja.
Fair enough. I always love the rationale, like the backup of that question, because you start to get, why?
I think just because it requires training. Although, listen, I don't really know anything about pirates. For all I know, like if you wanted to be a pirate in the 1400s, like you had to go for training for that too. I don't know. But in my mind, it's like ninjas require much more sophisticated training.
This is a deep question, right? Like this is back in the day, like maybe probably 2008-ish on Twitter, before the algorithm became even more encompassing. I remember asking that question because everybody had an opinion and it would warm up the engines. And then if we had something we really wanted to share, we'd just follow up on the trails behind the pirates or ninjas question that was like needed some juice. So, but the most fascinating thing ever is hearing people's answers. So anyway, yeah, so that was the genesis, but then it became very innocent of just pure, I want to know. And something that you've read recently, it could be an article, it could be a book, whatever, that you found interesting?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of reading a book called How to Become Supernatural. Yeah, and I'm only a few chapters in, but the chapter I just read last week is talking about how folks were asked to basically flex their muscle, like do a curl like this, but do it in their mind. So you're not actually allowed to move your limbs or like lift weights or anything. Mm-hmm. And over, I think it was a month, the arms were like 30% stronger. And they're like, the study was done at Harvard, and like the follow-up study, they actually put a cast on people just to make sure like they couldn't literally move their arm. So I'm starting to spend more time on thinking through just like how powerful the mind is and what it can do to your body physically, which I just find to be fascinating. I've been reading a little bit more about the potential of us living in a simulation. I know it's crazy, but I started thinking, okay, like lots of people are chit-chatting about it now. So I should at least get educated to figure out like, well, what's the theory behind this and what do I believe or not believe? So those are like the last couple of things that I've read that have been intellectually stimulating, I would say.
Ooh, very interesting. Very interesting. And kind of to wrap us up, so final question, I think back like where we started and where you mentioned your why not now idea or just experience that you shared of being, was it 1999 in your 103 weeks in, you had your first child halfway through. And if you could go back to yourself at that point and just give a little sprinkle of advice, what would you say?
I would have tried less. Yeah. I think I was always trying to overcompensate for the insecurities that I had, that I put on myself. And it led to like a lot of toxic events and hurt and introspection and on and on and on. And I think most of it just came down to me trying too hard to compensate for things that actually didn't matter in the end. You know, and I probably still am like super stubborn. So I don't know that I would have listened to myself back then if the older me had given the advice, but I think that's probably what I would have said.
I get that totally, but that's pretty powerful. Yeah, that's very resonant. And thank you. Thank you for sharing your time and your wisdom and just being so honest and candid. I really appreciate it. This is invaluable. And I have pages of notes here. So thank you.
You're so welcome.
And we'll make sure to continue to follow Sparrows too, and just also your journey in general.
Amazing. Thank you for having me.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your why not now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?